All you got to do is go that way, really fast. If something gets in your way, turn.
Passport to another world. Hello everybody and welcome to After the Film. Today we're going to be talking about two movies, Warcraft and The Conjuring 2. First up, Warcraft.
War is coming.
An invasion.
If we do not unite to fight this enemy, our world will perish.
I actually don't have a lot to say about Warcraft. If you're interested, it's entertaining. The FX are good. Performances are pretty good. My big complaint is that the movie feels incomplete, like they knew it was first movie of a trilogy, and it's a lot of setup for something else coming later.
For Verona, to get the amount of green that we needed would have required a lot of caked-on makeup, so we filmed Paula Patton without any makeup and turned her skin green in post.
Another big complaint, the music. A little generic fantasy, big orchestration that doesn't necessarily fit. I don't particularly like the music. Overall, the movie's fine. Structurally, it's good. Beginning, middle, and end, sets up good parts. No, not a true story, but it is based on two books, not specifically stuff from the video game, I guess. It is based on Rise of the Horde and The Last Guardian, like two sides of the same story that are now put together for this one. And Rise of the Horde, I think, gets fleshed out a little more in terms of the movie. And so you have like Duratan, played by Toby Cabell, and Garona, Paula Patton, get more story. Much more than the King Lane, Dominic Cooper, or Lothar, Travis Fimmel, although I really like that they don't spend a lot of time with Lothar specifically, like they don't give you a lot of exposition about who he is, why he is who he is. We hear that like his son's another soldier, and that's a big part of the story, but his wife died in childbirth, but they don't make a huge thing out of this. It's just in passing almost. In fact, the movie does that a lot. It starts with voiceover narration and ends with voiceover narration from Duratan, but just a couple lines and a couple lines, and the rest of the movie, it kind of lets you figure it out. One of the best things about this movie is that it lets you figure it out. It feels like a lived-in world. I mean, I know it's based on Warcraft, which many people have played for many years, and so there's a lot there. A lot of detail, a lot of designs that they can use. The orc designs are amazing. The sets are really cool and very fantastic, as it were.
The challenge with Draenor was basically to create our tents, our various levels of yurts. It was based on the structures you might find in any nomadic country from east of Asia to North Africa, but it just had a different scale to it.
There were a couple moments where I wish it was a little less lived in, like the dwarves and the elves show up for meeting and they don't matter to the movie. It's like it's making a point of the fact that they aren't involved. I'm like, why involve them then? And it's because, I guess, the specific story, the way it comes from the story of Warcraft. I don't know. I never played Warcraft, but I tried it once. And that's a little weird. Another one is that Medivh, played by Ben Foster, the Guardian, Medivh, when we first meet him, he's building a golem. And I'm like, I really hope that has nothing to do with the rest of this movie, and that golem is just something he's doing. But no, it's basically Chekhov's golem. And of course gets involved in a fight at the end of the movie, which is too bad. And it's kind of a spoiler, but not a big one. I really wish it had just been there. Little thing. Because that would make the world even more of a realistically lived-in world. Like, he just happens to have a hobby. And otherwise, the movie's cool. Good performances overall. The movie doesn't require a lot of big emoting scenes, so that works. My big spoiler. What did King Lane think was going to happen? I mean, I know he's setting it up so Garona gets to live, but in terms of this movie, this plot, it is a horrible choice. Like, he dies and his people escape barely and they lose. And where that comes down to another complaint of mine is that there's this big battle and we don't really see it. It's all CGI characters down at the bottom of the screen as we're watching other action. It would have been useful to know more characters at that point, but we don't. And overall, not just because it's based on Warcraft, which is pre-existing, because, you know, it's fantasy, there's not a lot offered here that's new. And that's fine, as long as you're into that. It's still going to be entertaining. So let's move on to The Conjuring 2.
Get out now. No, this is not your house. Now, what's your name? My name is Bill Wilkins, and I'm 72 years old.
What do you make of that voice?
Sounds confused. Is he senile?
The voice on this tape is coming from an 11-year-old girl. They're calling it England's Amityville.
And this one is based on a true story. Although, not accurately, which is kind of funny. A big part of that is throwing the Warrens in because you want to turn a franchise out of The Conjuring. According to, what's his name, Guy Lyon Playfair, who wrote the book about this haunting, the Warrens showed up uninvited and stuck around for like a day and then left. They didn't really do anything. In fact, he credits a Dutchman by the name of, let's see if I can get this right, Dono Melig Maling? Maybe? He credits him with ending the haunting. Dono is not in the movie. They include Maurice Grosse, probably just because he's got the awesome mustache. And Maurice Grosse was a big part of it. And the movie doesn't tell us an important detail about Maurice Grosse. And really, this review is all going to be all about the real stuff, because I used to love ghost stories and haunting stories and everything. Maurice Grosse briefly in the movie talks about how his daughter died, and that's what got him interested in ghosts and researching them. What we don't learn is that his daughter's name was Janet. And in case you haven't seen the movie, the main girl who is the center of the haunting here is also Janet Hodgson, played by, what's her name, Madison Wolfe, and she does a great job, Madison Wolfe. There's Janet. But it's kind of like that Martha moment in Batman v Superman. It probably would have seemed a little too perfect if they had pointed it out. So I'm glad they didn't mention his daughter's name. Although, oddly enough, the movie does include the fact that the mother, played by Frances O'Connor, is named Peggy, and the neighbor is also named Peggy, which actually was confusing briefly when I was watching the movie. Normally, even when you make a movie based on a true story, if there's people with the same name, you change one. Because one of the rules of screenwriting, don't have a bunch of people with the same name. Don't even have people with the same sounds to their name, or the same number of syllables. You try to get some variety in there because it makes it easier for the viewer to keep people apart. Since Peggy Nottingham is not that big a character, she keeps coming in and out, but she's not that important to the story. It's not that big a deal. Anyway, the haunting, the Enfield haunting. Yeah, it's fake.
How does it feel to be haunted by a poltergeist?
It's not haunted. Shut up.
And she even explained later it's not haunted because they don't feel like it's evil. They don't feel like it's a bad presence. which is completely contradicted by this fictional version in The Conjuring 2, where it's more like this absolute evil, this evil nun figure, which is in the trailer, but you don't learn much about, has been... spoilers?
What? No!
This evil nun has been haunting Lorraine Warren since Amityville, as we learned at the beginning of the movie. And oh, that opening sequence at Amityville is bad.
Because it sucks ass!
It's got this cheesiness factor that reminded me a bit too much of Insidious. I know a lot of people liked Insidious, but I hated that film. And I think Patrick Wilson is actually one of the weak points of this movie. He shouldn't be acting in horror films. His sense of drama and horror is always very fake. I don't know. Maybe fake's not the right word. But anyway, back to the real story. For example, one of the things they get wrong is the Nottinghams were not across the street. They were next door. One of the things that supposedly happened was that Janet disappeared from her room, going through the wall into the Nottingham's house. Of course, no one saw this. It was just Janet claiming it, and everything was pretty much Janet claiming it, which is something this movie deals with really well. Except for, like, especially the third act. The movie does a good job of showing why the investigators would think everything is fake. Things happen when no one's looking. A lot of their evidence is just Janet talking in another voice, using what's called false vocal cords, which someone can train themselves to do, or I would guess have a natural talent with. I don't know. And her voices in real life, it wasn't just Bill Wilkins. It wasn't just this old guy who died in the house, although there was an old guy who had died in the house.
How many voices are there?
Dirty Dick, Andrew Garner, and Stuart Thurton.
Dirty Dick, Andrew Garner, and Stuart
Thurton.
And so much of their evidence as the most recorded haunting ever was her talking in other voices and people talking about what they saw. And I saw this big argument from, I think it was from Playfair, the guy that wrote the book, about how in a haunting case, testimony is evidence. And like, not if you're trying to prove something actually happened. Testimony ain't it. Testimony is nothing. So much of the investigation in real life, they kept the investigators like out of the bedroom where everything was happening. They could only listen to her talking when she was like covering her mouth or under a blanket, or they were facing the other direction, so they couldn't really see her. Just like in the movie, when she sort of blurs into Bill Wilkins and is talking, they're not looking at her, and we can't really see her. We just see a blurry background. We're focused on Ed Warren, Patrick Wilson. And that's a good way to represent the way this case went down in reality. That so much of it was impossible to prove. And was probably just Janet and Margaret Hodgson making shit up. Because, I don't know, they wanted attention. Maybe their mother was actually involved. That's one of the things that actually comes up in the movie. That Janet Hodgson is promoting this stuff so that they can get a better house. Because they're poor. Them being poor actually brings me to a big point I have about the way the movie is structured. Is that there's this nice happy ending with the Warrens. Like, they've gotten rid of this evil nun figure that they've been dealing with. Valak, the demon. And they go home where, I guess in real life they had a daughter. In terms of this movie, it barely matters that she exists. She's in a couple scenes. She seems kind of arbitrary. But they have a happy ending. They're happy together. They go home. They're fine. And it's implied that the Hodgsons are doing okay, except the Hodgsons are not okay. They're still poor. They still live in this house that is falling apart and old. It's still the 4 kids and the mother because the father has left them for another woman and another kid. And they're not well off. It's not a happy ending, unless you take all this stuff seriously. Which, whether Janet Hodgins was involved in the hoax in real life or not, the daughters could certainly benefit from all the attention too, because people coming over means maybe the house gets fixed up. They make a point in the movie of Ed fixing a couple things in the house. And I'm wondering if maybe some of the investigators did that sort of thing in reality too. I haven't read Playfair's book. Just read a couple essays by him. And he didn't talk about that part. As far as the movie goes, it actually, other than that opening in Amityville, it actually works really well, despite departing from the reality, which is questionable anyway. But departing from that reality, the movie does a good job with its scares. It does a great job with its performances. It does a really good job of portraying Ed and Lorraine as this loving couple who are with each other because partly they need each other, but also they understand each other. And it's cute. There's actually a very cute sort of love story between them going on during the movie. And yeah, as far as haunted house stories go, it's a great movie. The effects are nice. Bill Wilkins is actually a fairly scary villain. The nun figure is not as scary. It's a little too obviously trying to be scary. She comes across a little like that cheesiness of Insidious as well. But yeah, if you're into horror films, you like haunted houses, Conjuring 2 is much better than the first one. And light years better than Annabelle. Or the remake of the Amityville Horror. The original was pretty good, but the remake was awful. Yeah. So, go see it. Or see something else. Or see Warcraft. Or just see some movies. Enjoy some movies. Live.
We keep doing this, you're going to die.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.